The preseason had a larger impact on tight end than any other position in fantasy football. A lot of these late round targets are now guys that are no longer even viable to draft. I mean, you have Darren Waller skyrocketing up rankings. So we're going to go through. I'll give you my updated ranks, but at 1, nothing changes. You have Travis Kelce. There's only one red flag that you're looking at with the best tight end we've seen over the past 5 years, and that's going to be he's 34 years old this next season. Now, if you look at every other player being drafted inside the top 100 picks in fantasy, there's not another non-quarterback that is even close to 34 years old. If you look back since the year 2000, you only had 4 wide receivers that were able to average more than 78 receiving yards per game, and that was Terrell Owens, Marvin Harrison, Reggie Wayne, and Joey Galloway. Generally, there are no productive players that are 34, 35, 36 in fantasy. With this being said, more likely than not, Kelce will be a little bit worse this next season than he was last year. But he can still be a little bit worse while easily being the tight end 1 overall in fantasy. Really comes down to your overall league format, right? If you're going to be playing in an 8-team league, in a 10-team format where you only have 1 flex spot, where it's going to be so easy to find wide receivers, so easy to find running backs later on, then based off just the elite positional advantage Kelce's going to give you, you honestly should target Kelce round 1 in that style format. However, if you're like in an underdog draft where it's going to be so much harder to find wide receiver values later, there I'd actually probably wait until you see some of the other tight ends on this list, go for a later round 1 and grab wide receivers early. Now, going over to our next guy, we will be looking at Mark Andrews. With Andrews, very unique situation this next season, right? And that he has played alongside Lamar Jackson for quite some time, and he has been in a very similar situation every single season. And that situation is it's Mark Andrews and Mark Andrews alone in this passing game. I mean, the best option you had last year, the best option you had in previous seasons, guys like Devin Duvernay. Now you have Odell. You have a healthy Bateman. You have Zay Flowers as well. So I think you see the target share go down from Mark Andrews, where he averaged 25% of his team's targets over the past 3 seasons on a per game basis, as probably down closer to 22%. But the passing volume may actually go up in Baltimore with the change with the coaching staff. Now, going over to our next guy, we will look at Hawkinson. I've noticed TJ Hawkinson falling a considerable amount in underdog drafts. Like, there have been drafts where I've been able to get TJ Hawkinson at the 5-6 turn. And I'm telling you, I will take him there literally every single time. Because if I look at TJ Hawkinson in comparison to some of the other wide receivers he is going next to on underdog, right now TJ Hawkinson is being drafted directly ahead of Deontay Johnson, Christian Kirk, Tyler Lockett, Chris Godwin, and I truly believe that TJ Hawkinson, who is the tight end 3 from a points per game perspective last season, now stepping into his prime, can straight up outscore these wide receivers. Hawkinson helped us get 16th place in Best Ball Mania and win $10,000 in that underdog tournament last season. I mean, this is someone that was an elite level prospect. Over the past 3 years, he's averaged a top 5 tight end finish. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to draft TJ Hawkinson with aggression at that price point. Now, our next guy will be George Kittle, and we'll talk about Darren Waller in just 1 second. And Darren Waller has jumped all these other players in ADP. But with George Kittle, if you're looking at a points per game perspective, he's been a top 5 tight end for 3 straight seasons now. You have no Trey Lance here, obviously going over to Dallas. And if you look at the splits with and without Brock Purdy last year, George Kittle was actually best with Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy starting for the 49ers is more times than not going to be a good thing for George Kittle this next season. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to continue to take Kittle aggressively. Like similar, if we go over to Underdog and look at where he's going next to the wide receivers, I think George Kittle freaking outscores these guys. He's going next to Mike Evans, Jahan Dotson, Gabe Davis, Hollywood Brown. I'm going to take him a lot there. And someone that I'm drafting more than anybody else over the past few weeks because he has fallen like a rock in ADP is Kyle Pitts. And yes, I understand everybody. Go down to the comment section and let me hear it. Mason, you're an idiot. Mason, you have no idea what the hell you're talking about. How can you have Kyle Pitts over Darren Waller? I understand. I get it. I just want to take a step back with Kyle Pitts. He was the best tight end prospect of all time. Doesn't matter what you're looking at. Athleticism, off the charts. Production, off the charts. Size, off the charts. Went higher than any tight end in NFL draft history. He goes into his rookie season at 21 years old, and you assume that there's no way in hell this guy's going to produce, right? Then he goes out, and the only 21-year-old pass catchers that were as good as Kyle Pitts were guys like Odell Beckham Jr., Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, literally only elite level wide receivers. This past season, we can say he was very disappointing from a fantasy football perspective, but that was to no fault of his own. He actually averaged 24% of his team's target share this past year. It was just the Atlanta Falcons were the second worst passing offense we've seen in the NFL over the past decade. So you're telling me that we have a tight end that was the best prospect ever, the best rookie ever, continued to improve in year 2, but was in the worst situation you could ever imagine. I'm going to bet on this guy. I think this guy has upside. Tight ends don't produce early on in their career. You'll see that I'm low on some of the rookies later on in this list, and I'm betting on the bounce back. And I'm also betting on Dallas Goedert over Darren Waller as well. It's going to be something else that people hate to see. Goedert last year was the tight end 5 from a points per game perspective. Dallas Goedert has improved every single season if you're looking at his receiving yards on a per game basis. His target share last year was up at 18%. I think that he is arguably going to be the best offense in the NFL this next year. He's still in his prime, only sitting at 28 years old for this next season. Yeah, so I'm in on Dallas Goedert, similar to what we were looking at with Kyle Pitts as well. I think these tight ends outscore the wide receivers they're being drafted ahead of. I mean, right now you have Kyle Pitts, Dallas Goedert being drafted right before Quentin Johnston, Brandon Cooks, Courtland Sutton, being drafted right after Zay Flowers. Zay Flowers getting drafted as the wide receiver 40 will be outscored by Dallas Goedert and Kyle Pitts being drafted as the tight end 6 and tight end 7. This is how you get the advantage at that 1C position. This is honestly why in those underdog drafts, I haven't taken a lot of Kelsey, just because I love slamming tight ends in this price range. But of course, ladies and gentlemen, y'all know we are drafting every single night on the live stream in those underdog best ball drafts. They're best balls, so no time commitment at all during the season. So I drafted 700 teams that won $150,000 on Underdog last year. And if you sign up to Underdog with promo code FLOCK, they're going to match your first deposit dollar for dollar up to $100. Plus, you're going to get our 2023 fantasy football rankings, a free trial to flockfantasy.com where you can find our 2023 fantasy football draft guide. And I got y'all hooked up week 1 with a Josh Allen special pick'em exclusive for people who use promo code FLOCK. Josh Allen more than less than half a passing yard against the New York Jets. So please make sure you're taking advantage of that. Now, our next guy that I am sorry I will probably never draft again this offseason is Darren Waller. Now, if you wanted to have Waller over Goddard, if you wanted to have Waller over Pitts, I'm not going to argue with you in the slightest. You do you can make that selection. But the reason that I will never draft Darren Waller is he is now going as the tight end 4 ahead of George Kittle. And I agree, yeah, this is a good situation for him, right? But if we are realistic with ourselves, we can at least acknowledge the red flags that you have with Darren Waller. Darren Waller is a tight end that has declined in 3 key metrics every single season. If you're looking at his target share from a points per game perspective, 26% to 23% down to 14%. If you're looking at his yards per route run, 2.4% to 1.8% to 1.6%. If you look at his fantasy football finish, tight end 2 to tight end 6 to tight end 10. This is a tight end that was traded for a 3rd round NFL draft pick. This is a tight end that at the same time is not like Kyle Pitts, not like TJ Hawkinson, not like George Kittle. He's not like these guys. He's turning 31 in a couple weeks. So it makes sense why you see this natural decline from Darren Waller. Now, I'll be the first person to admit, great preseason, great training camp, great situation. And there are very positive marks on this Darren Waller profile, and which is why I'm completely fine if you want to take him ahead of any other tight ends in this tier, and if you wanted to go through and take him ahead of pretty much anybody not named George Kittle. But once people start pushing him ahead of Kittle, where Kittle's been a top 5 tight end for 3 seasons straight, so I think the hype's kind of gotten out of control and where I can't be drafting Darren Waller anymore. Now, going down to our next tier, we're going to have Evan Ingram, Pat Freiermuth, David Njoku. All these guys I really like. Evan Ingram dominated at the end of last season. I mean, he finished as the tight end 7, but if you just look at the second half of the year, I mean, the man was off the charts. But this next year, you do have Calvin Ridley coming over. And with the addition of Calvin Ridley, I think you can naturally assume the target share is going down for Evan Ingram. Pat Freiermuth is one of my most drafted tight ends this year. I mean, if we're going to go through and look at where he is going in underdog drafts, you're currently getting him as the tight end 9. directly before Romeo Doubs, Odell Beckham Jr. This is why I can't stop drafting tight ends in this range, because I think these tight ends outscore the wide receivers, as we already mentioned. And with Darren Waller, he is on the trajectory where he kind of looks like he's having a George Kittle level start to his NFL career. Now, of course, nobody's going to give him the credit because he hasn't been, phenomenal in fantasy, but you never expect rookies. You never expect second-year players to be good in fantasy. That's why I'm in on Freiermuth, in on Pitts going into year 3. Now, our next guy with David Njoku caught that receiving touchdown in the preseason. Can be super excited about this offense overall. I love David Njoku. Especially as a prospect coming out of Miami. I was in love with this guy in 2017. Now, dropping down to our next tier, this is a pretty big tier drop, all right? So, any of these top 10 players, I am fine if you wanted to draft them as your tight end 1 in your regular redraft format, and if you wanted to not roster a backup tight end. Now, I will say, if you are drafting a top 7 guy, like if you draft Darren Waller, if you draft Dallas Goedert, if you draft Mark Andrews, please do not roster a backup tight end. The reason you take that elite level guy is so you can pick up some extra running back upside on your bench. If you're getting Evan Ingram, Pat Freiermuth, David Njoku, it's kind of up to you. You can decide to roster a second tight end. You can decide to only roster one. Really, it comes down to if you find that second value that you really like at the tight end position. But once you get past David Njoku, this is the range where no matter what, I want you drafting at least 2 tight ends. This tier, we have Dalton Schultz, Dalton Kincaid, Tyler Higbee, as well as Cole Kmet. Now, the guy I want to point out here is going to be Dalton Kincaid. And I think from an end of season perspective, if you're just looking at those like underdog tournaments, right, where, Best Ball Mania, $25 buy-in, $3 million for first place, where we're trying to optimize for weeks 15, 16, 17, I think there Dalton Kincaid has an incredibly high ceiling. Now, the fundamental issue with Dalton Kincaid is in your regular redraft format, you're not going to be able to start him at the beginning of the season. You can't really expect anything from rookie tight ends, especially right out the gate. So it is a tough spot. If you want to draft Kincaid for his late season upside, then all of a sudden you're going to have that other tight end that you feel comfortable with in this range to at least cover you at the beginning portion of the season. Now, our next tier is going to be filled with tight ends that are players you can draft, but be quick to drop as well, because all these guys have massive red flags. You have a Tennessee Titans tight end that may be the 4th option in this offense behind Henry, Hopkins, and Burks, and it may be one of the worst offenses in the NFL. Irv Smith Jr. has not had good reports coming out of training camp. Gerald Everett looks like he's a question mark. Everett's never really been that good in fantasy. Plus, you have so much more added target competition this year. You have Greg Dulcich, who right now is looking like he's possibly splitting with Adam Troutman. He's actually going to be our biggest faller since the last time we made this list. You have Sam Laporta, who looks like he's in a great spot in Detroit, right? But at the end of the day, he wasn't an elite level prospect. It's not like he went round 1 like Dalton Kincaid to the perfect situation with Josh Allen. So with Laporta, you can draft him for his end of season upside, but you're never going to start him early on. And then with Juwan Johnson, the man's flashed a bit, but you're not necessarily sitting here saying, oh, okay, well, yeah, he just needed a little bit of time to develop. Now he's 23, now he's 24. He can actually start taking steps forward. No, the man turns 27 in a couple weeks. So, are we really expecting that he has some massive breakout all of a sudden? Probably not. Going down to our next tier, these are going to be guys that are strictly best ball options. If I'm going to be honest with you, in your regular shallow redraft format, I don't know if I would want you to go through and draft Dawson Knox, draft Jake Ferguson, draft Luke Musgrave. All these players have some reasons to be optimistic about them. And obviously in your underdog drafts where it's best ball and you're drafting 2 to 3 tight ends overall, you definitely need to be taking shots at these guys as your tight end 3 in some spots. But in that regular redraft format, I would rather kind of treat this as the tier of, okay, I'm going to put this guy on my watch list. If we all of a sudden early on in the season see that Dawson Knox is actually playing ahead of Dalton Kincaid, and Kincaid's going to take a little bit later to come on in the second half of the year, then run out there and pick up Dawson Knox right away. Or same thing, if we see that Dallas continues to use the tight end position as they did with Dalton Schultz in years past, then run out there and grab Jake Ferguson. If Luke Musgrave looks like he's actually catching passes in Green Bay and not just a primary blocking option, run out there and get Musgrave. If Zach Ertz is actually healthy, if Zach Ertz is actually out there playing, then hell, go run out there and get Zach Ertz. But in terms of the overall strategy that we should have with this tier, I don't really know if we want to be drafting any of these guys. I would more so say as an overarching draft strategy, if you are playing in a league that is a shallow format, say a 10-team league where you only start 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, a tight end, and a flex, you are best off trying to grab an elite level tight end, going with the Kelsey, Andrews, Hawkinson, or Kittle early, and then not rostering a backup tight end and optimizing for that running back upside on your bench. However, if you're playing in that deeper format where tight end's going to make up a smaller percentage of your starting lineup output, while at the same time it's going to be a little more difficult to find wide receivers, say you're in an underdog draft, or maybe you're in an ESPN draft where it's a 12-team league, you start 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 3 wide receivers, a tight end, and 2 to 3 flex spots. There, you're probably better off actually punting tight end, waiting until you get to the Dalton Schultz, Dalton Kincaid, Tyler Higbee, Cole Kmet tier, grabbing one of those tight ends, and then also grabbing someone in the Irv Smith Jr. tier as well, and rostering 2 of them in that instance. But I think that's all I have for you. Again, thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for checking out this video. If you have not done so already, go down there, drop a like, subscribe to the channel if you play fantasy football. And if you want to get into a draft with us, whether that's tonight, tomorrow, the next night, we're drafting every single night on Underdog Fantasy, ladies and gentlemen. Find that link in the comment section, find it in the description. Promo code FLOCK, they'll match first deposit, dollar for dollar up to 100. Plus, you'll get our 2023 fantasy football rankings, a free trial to flockfantasy.com where you can find our 2023 fantasy football draft guide and take advantage of the exclusive Josh Allen pick'em. I got y'all week 1 on Underdog, only for people who use promo code FLOCK, more than less than half a passing yard against the Jets. But thank you again, ladies and gentlemen. I really do appreciate you, and I really hope I get to see you out with the live stream later tonight.